Good afternoon and welcome to the April 9th, 2025 edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm the founder and executive director of the center, and I thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start off by telling you just a little bit about the center, then issue a quick disclaimer. We'll go into updates, and then we'll jump right into the questions that have been submitted from our community. So, the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness was founded officially in 2021 with an ambitious vision for all college and career school students within the state of Maryland. And that's that they would be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. Those are being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. So if this sounds like a vision that you're interested in, please do visit our website online. We are mccfw.org. And if you have been helped by any of our programs, office hours, in-person clinics, the No More or Less project, anything McPhew related, if you have been helped, please do let us know. Submit the contact form and give us feedback. And if you feel so inclined, you can support by making a tax-deductible donation at mccfw.org/support. And now about this particular program, Office Hours. Office Hours is usually presented twice per month and is presented to help Marylanders and whoever's watching on YouTube, wherever you're from, but to help people navigate student loan repayment. And we know that the landscape has been quite challenging over the past few years. We do our best to give you the most up-to-date information possible, but I do have to issue a disclaimer that Office Hours is presented for informational purposes only. The information that's presented during today's broadcast or any other does not constitute personal, legal, or financial advice. There are a lot of factors that go into making decisions about your student loan repayment journey. That's your preferences, your household characteristics like your income, the number of people who are in your home, how many of those people you're responsible for. You have to assess those things and then take stock of your student loans, that portfolio of loans, and combine all that information to figure out what's best for you. We just hope to be a contributor to that information to help you make more informed and better decisions. So now that that's out of the way, I just want to get to a quick update to go through a few things before we jump into the specific questions that have come in from members of our community. The first thing that I wanted to share is that you probably know by now, but the online applications for both income-driven repayment and direct loan consolidation have been restored, and you can find those applications online at studentaid.gov. If you want to complete them, you will have to log into your studentaid.gov FSA account so that you can access the applications and complete them. Now, while the applications are available, we've been checking servicer platforms as well as studentaid.gov for updates about processing. Unfortunately, there is no clear timeline that's been identified for processing. So you can submit an application. We've heard that from FSA and from the loan servicer. So I'm glad, everybody's on the same page, but the processing timeline has not been published. So all of that to say, don't expect quick action. If you want to switch out of the income-driven plan that you're in right now over to another one, then you can complete the application, but we don't have a timeline for when that application will be processed and when the switch will officially be completed. The second thing that I wanted to mention is a state level update, and that is for public service loan forgiveness. We were able to work with Delegate Ryan Spiegel at the state level and advocate along with the Cash Campaign of Maryland and the Student Borrower Protection Center and Prince George's County Sheriff John D.B. Carr. And we have a successful bill, HB 795, which is the PSLF Awareness and Certification Bill, passed the House, passed the Senate, and made its way to Governor Wes Moore. So we'll learn more, hopefully, about the official signing very soon, but we're just really excited to have been a part of that process and to know that now public servants within the state of Maryland will have increased access to information about the program because PSLF is still here, and there'll also be extra guidance for especially our adjunct faculty members, our colleagues in higher ed who may be teaching a few credits here and there at campuses across the state. But this makes a clearer path for them to complete their PSLF applications and enjoy the benefit that they have earned as public servants. So thanks to our advocacy team and our partners at Cash and the SBPC. And we're glad to finally get this bill to the governor's desk. I think that does it for updates right now. We'll cover more within the questions that have come in from our community. So let's go to the first question. And that question is, what does this mean? Well, that's a loaded question. So we're going to take a look at the details to figure out exactly what this borrower is speaking of. It says, my loans are in limbo. They changed my servicer, and now the news says they are moving to the Small Business Administration. What does that mean for me? Okay, let's take a look at the answer. I saw the news as well, and there have been a few things that have happened in the news. The first one is that there was an executive order that came from the White House that gave some rationale for eliminating the Department of Education altogether. Within that executive order, the size of the federal student aid loan portfolio, about 1.6 or $1.7 trillion was mentioned, and the fact that the Department of Education doesn't have, or did not at that time have, a comparable amount of employees as Wells Fargo, who I guess that organization has a portfolio that is similar in size, but the Department of Education has been managing this portfolio with much less staff resources. And so I'm talking about staffing, talking about the business of financing, and the executive order basically laid out the intention to eliminate the Department of Education. We're aware of that executive order. We just want to remind everyone that these orders, they take time to implement. And in the case of some orders that have been issued already, courts have found that the contents are likely illegal. And when that happens, things can get paused, things can get reversed, and there can be, kind of a tussle until an ultimate decision is made about the legality of the contents. So while the executive order has been published, and we do know that the Department of Education had its workforce reduced by nearly half, some things are happening. Another part of that, though, was an announcement from the White House that the federal student aid loan portfolio would move over to the Small Business Administration. We heard that too, but we haven't heard anything else about that transition. And from the borrowers that we work with, and I can tell you as a student loan borrower myself, I go to studentaid.gov, I can still view my loans there. When I go to my loan servicer, which is Mohila, at mohila.studentaid.gov, my loans are still there. I say all of that to say that you read the news, you watch some of these announcements, just remember what's announced isn't going to happen instantly. And in some cases, depending on how the court, cases shake out, some of this won't happen at all. So the best that you can do in the moment is, yes, see it, hear it, but do not go about making major decisions or major adjustments, or go into a panic because of what you've heard, because it takes a lot to move a 1.6 or $1.7 trillion portfolio of loans from one agency to another. It takes a lot to eliminate an entire department, especially one as important as the Department of Education. So, stay tuned. Definitely keep in the loop with us, because we take that information, and one of our goals is to take it and really kind of translate it into something you can actually use and let you know when an action is necessary. Right now, we're just observing. Now is not the time to take any kind of action. So to this particular borrower, I totally get it. You feeling like your loans are in limbo. My advice to you, beyond just hearing things and not acting on them right away, would be to go to your servicer's portal, download all of your records. Go to studentaid.gov, download your text file. If you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, take a screenshot of your payment count. Download as much history as you possibly can, just so that if any transitions are truly taking place, you will have access to accurate information, or you'll have access to the information that was available to you before that transition, just in case something gets lost temporarily, during that process. So keep your records and just keep on observing. And if there's anything significant that comes about that requires action, we will definitely talk about it here. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, so someone said my master promissory note says the Department of Education. Does that mean I don't have to pay since they are moving to SBA? All right, so this is getting to the heart of something that has been circulating on social media for quite some time. And this is the notion that one, because the DOGE people had access to information, and as borrowers, we didn't give them express permission for that, that makes the case for the loans to be completely forgiven or canceled. The other thing that's happening now is people are saying that, like this question, since the loans are supposed to be with Ed, if they move to SBA, does that mean that I don't have to pay them? And I just want to state this very clearly right now. Your student loans are owed to the federal government. The federal government has many agencies. The Department of Treasury is already involved in the processing of student loan payments, even though the lender that you see on paper is the Department of Education. So whether a loan moves from the Department of Education to the Department of the Treasury, I don't see this as a viable opportunity to argue for debt being canceled. For student loan borrowers, we haven't seen our loans before move from one agency to another, but we've seen them move from one servicer to another. I've gone from Nelnet to Mohila. I don't know if there was a party before Nelnet because I can't remember, but I've seen people who have had loans move all over the place. And something similar might happen with a different kind of loan. You have different servicers, loans are bought and sold. That doesn't negate the borrower's responsibility to pay the debt. So I get that the master promissory note doesn't mention DOGE or anything like that. And there are a lot of things that have happened in recent months that we're kind of taken aback by, might not understand, might not agree with. But that does not negate your responsibility as a borrower to live up to the terms and conditions that were specified in the master promissory note that you signed when you borrowed student loans. So even though other agencies and their representatives are involved in this process, the document, that master promissory note, is in its entirety. It's long, but it's good to give it a read so that you can understand it and apply what's in there to making decisions about your student loan repayment journey, where you have the flexibility to make those decisions. So our advice to you is stay vigilant. Please be careful about who you listen to when it comes to student loans, and make wise decisions about your student loan repayment strategy and your forgiveness strategy. And I need to circle back to NASFA. NASFA is the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. I think that the talk about this, student loan cancellation because of what the MPN says, DOGE people moving to SBA, I think that NASFA finally published something to kind of squash this notion of being able to have your loans canceled because the lender is making shifts. And so once I find that resource, I will definitely share that with everyone or leave the comment in the bottom of this video. All right, let's move on to the next question. And that is, am I Pell eligible? I have one more year of school. Will I lose my Pell Grant? So I think that this question is also related to the things that we've heard, in the news about the Department of Education shutting down. And from our vantage point, student loans are where we have invested a lot of energy in recent years. So when people reach out to us about the Department of Ed, most of the time they're thinking about student loans and what will happen to their loans. But the Department of Education is also responsible for issuing grants, including the Pell Grant program. So when people have heard, well, the Department of Education is shutting down, they're wondering, well, does that mean that I'm going to lose my Pell Grant and perhaps not be able to go to school? So let's take a look at the answer to that question. So as of today, none of the recent changes with the Department of Education, the layoffs, the plan to eliminate it, none of those recent changes, we're not aware of any way that they should affect your Pell Grant eligibility. So if you completed your FAFSA and you've been deemed eligible for a Pell Grant and you're going to be enrolled this year and you have not reached your lifetime eligibility limit, then you should still be able to attend your last year of college using your Pell Grant. Remember, the Pell Grant is a federal program. The only way to get a Pell Grant is to complete the FAFSA and have your eligibility assessed. And those processes are housed within the Department of Education. Even though, this plan has been announced to eliminate the Department of Education, it's still here, it's still functioning. And as a current student, if you are a current student and you are a Pell Grant recipient, please go about your studies as if you are going to receive your Pell Grant for the next year. As long as you completed that FAFSA, you will be enrolled. Your eligibility is still there and you haven't exhausted your Pell Grant eligibility up to that limit, then you should be able to have your Pell Grant for the 25-26 year. And just generally speaking, it's very, I don't want to say frustrating, but it's really unfortunate to have these questions coming from students who are so far into the academic journey and wondering if it's going to be disrupted because of what's happening at the federal level. So keep on going. We're hopeful that things will work out the way that they're supposed to, but as of right now, there is nothing to indicate that your eligibility for federal financial aid will be disrupted because of the announcements that we've heard about the department overall. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, should I even send my kid to college? That is a common question at this point. And I recently visited McDaniel College out in Westminster, Maryland, to speak with a group of parents of high school students. And a couple of parents did raise that question, what's going to happen if the Department of Education is eliminated? Should I still send my child to college? So let's take a look at the background for this question first and then the answer. So this question came from a parent, a single mom with sufficient income. They completed the FAFSA and qualified for the Pell Grant, as well as the Guaranteed Access Grant from the Maryland Higher Education Commission. As of right now, their child is not sold on staying in the state of Maryland, and the Pell Grant is the financial aid that the parent is most concerned about. So let's take a look at the answer for this question. So our advice to this parent and to other students is, if this was your intention, if your intention was for your child to pursue higher ed before the news that has come out so far about the Department of Education and the executive order regarding the dismantling of the Department of Education, we recommend that you proceed with your plans. And the key word is to have a plan. If you need to revise your plan, if something significant happened later that would prevent your child from going to college, then of course we recommend doing that. But for right now, most of what we've seen, they're words. There, of course, was a workforce reduction, and we have not yet seen how much that will impact the functionality of the Department of Education. But there's nothing that we have seen that would indicate that the Pell Grant is going away. So continue on with your plans. I would like to add to that, though, please do check in with your child about their mental health because children are hearing and seeing some of the same things that we're seeing, and they might be seeing other takes on it as well. They also might be getting information from sources that aren't reporting things accurately. So please check with your child. Ask them if they're afraid. It's really important to talk with your child about this higher ed experience and also the parts of it that are different this year because of the many things that we're hearing and some of the things that are happening at the federal level with the Department of Education and at the campus level. Please do talk to your children, devise a plan, not just around the higher ed journey, but about how they access information about the higher ed journey. It's okay to be tuned in. You want to be aware. You want to hear the news. Take note of it where it matters, but not to absorb it, because we're hearing conflicting messages. We're hearing, some misinformation. Things are just all over the place. And you definitely want to avoid, if you can, having your, mental health, your moods, your decision going on the roller coaster of the news cycle, which is endless. So we wish this parent and student the best. All right, let's move on to the next question. That question is, what does it mean to be certified for TOP? Can my loans be forgiven? All right, so this question has two layers. First, we can talk about TOP, which is the Treasury Offset Program. And let's take a look at the background before we get the specific answer on this question. So it says, my loans have been defaulted since 2016. I would like to qualify for PSLF and get these off of me. I've been working for a qualifying employer since 2010. Will I be able to get these loans forgiven? All right, let's take a look at the answer and we'll tackle first Treasury offset and then the possibility of loans being forgiven. So TOP is the Treasury Offset Program, and we just lifted this information straight from the Department of Education. Treasury offset is when a payment from the U.S. Department of Treasury, such as your income tax refund, is reduced or stopped to pay off a delinquent debt. If your refund is offset, you'll be sent an explanatory letter from the Bureau of Fiscal Service. And if the whole refund isn't applied to the debt, the remainder will be processed as usual. The offset shouldn't delay it. So in a nutshell, if you're expecting, a refund on your taxes, but you are delinquent or actually in default on a federal student loan, your income tax refund can be seized, and that's through the Treasury Offset Program. Now, in terms of loan forgiveness, PSLF is still available. However, PSLF does not forgive defaulted loans that are currently in default. So we have helped people get their loans out of default and get them forgiven by way of PSLF. So forgiveness is possible. It's just that the loans will not be forgiven while they are in default. So you need to complete the process of getting the loans out of default. When you bring the loans out of the default, they'll move to a new servicer. And once they have been restored to a good standing, you can apply for PSLF using the PSLF Help Tool, which is available at studentaid.gov. So getting loans forgiven after a default is possible, but the loans will not be forgiven if they are still in default. So you've got to get out of default. All right, let's move on to the next question. This question is also about default. Let's get some background on the default and how we can hopefully help this borrower emerge from it. Okay, so this person is trying to start paying attention to their loans. It says, I don't know what to do. Studentaid.gov states that my loans are defaulted. I created an account on another site. Is this legitimate and what does it tell me? So if you are in default, once you log into studentaid.gov, usually there's a text bar at the top. It might have some red in it that says you have at least one loan that's in default and they want you to get out of it. Getting out of default, though, is managed by another group. So there is another website that you go to in order to initiate the process of getting out of default. And that website is legitimate. You can see a screenshot of some of the contents there from that site, but it is legitimate and it can help you get out of default and on the path to a good standing. And if PSLF is on your radar, it can help you get there too. Now let's take a look at the first part of the answer for this question, because there are two. Okay. You can call a representative or you can complete the process online and they'll walk you through your repayment options based on your self-reported adjusted gross income for your household and the number of people or dependents in your household. Because the push for the longest time has been that if a person is in default, income-driven repayment could put them on a pathway to repayment that is feasible. So when you're on the phone with a representative or using the website, they're going to ask for that information because they're probably going to direct you, depending on your answers, to an income-driven repayment plan. They may also walk you through three options for getting out of default. The first one is to pay in full. This one is one that oftentimes I don't even want to mention it, because usually when a person is in default and not making monthly payments, it's because they can't afford to make the monthly payments. And if you can't afford to make the monthly payment, you probably can't afford to pay the debt off in full. But that is an option. The second option is to settle for a lowered amount and make that payment within 90 days, which also isn't feasible for most people. And the last option is to resume making monthly payments. So you have choices here, but making monthly payments is likely the most feasible choice. Let's move on to the next part of the answer. So let the representative know for sure if the monthly payment that they've quoted is not feasible. You'll be asked to submit a form along with 2 pay stubs that are less than, that should be 60 to 90 days old, and proof of all of your debt. You can submit that form by fax or by physical mail to the Department of Education's default resolution group. Just make sure that you're honest about it. If you know upfront that you cannot afford that, you should tell them and provide the documentation so that you don't, enroll in something that you know is not feasible from day one and then find yourself back in delinquency or default later. So wishing this borrower the best, and hopefully they will emerge successfully from default. All right, let's take a look at our next question. It is, I applied for the PSLF buyback and was denied. Why? We've been seeing a lot of this lately, so let's take a look at the background so we can give this borrower an answer that is specific to their situation. It says, I am over 120 repayment months and decided to apply using the Save Forbearance as the reason. I received a denial, and the reason was the Save Forbearance was not an acceptable reason for applying. So when we started to see this was definitely a shock, because typically when it comes to PSLF, the periods of repayment that do not count are usually periods where a loan was in forbearance, deferment, or default, or an in-school deferment. But with the Biden administration, there were some rules implemented to provide leeway around forbearances, specifically looking at the type of forbearance. Some forbearances are voluntary, some are administrative. Some of them are requested by the borrower. The Save Forbearance is the kind of forbearance that I'll say we have not seen before. With the pandemic, we had the CARES Act forbearance. That was a forbearance that everyone was swept into, but it was because of a national emergency. So during that time, interest wasn't accruing for most people. Payments were not required. And even without payments being required, those months counted toward forgiveness under both public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment. That is not the case with the Save Forbearance. The Save Forbearance was not voluntary, but it was the result of a lawsuit and an injunction. So we haven't seen this kind of situation before, but because the forbearance was not initiated by the borrower, we were under the impression that the buyback could be used to recapture those months. And now we've seen people receive rejections like this one that say the Save Forbearance is not an acceptable reason for the buyback. Honestly, we're shocked, and I wish that this could change, and maybe it will. I'm not sure on that, but we're definitely surprised and just want that to change. So as we wait for this lawsuit to be resolved, perhaps this stance on the status of the Save Forbearance being negated from PSLF and the buyback, perhaps that can be reversed. In the meantime, it might be helpful for you to save the money that you would have been paying each month in case the buyback is allowed to be used in the future where that Save Forbearance is concerned. So we'll be watching and waiting for news. All right, let's take a look at the next question. That question is PSLF Help Tool 404 error message. What do I do? We all know the 404 error message, and I've seen it several times. The good thing is usually it's temporary. So let's take a look at the answer for this question. We have experienced this when assisting clients, and sometimes we experience it on the very last part of the application. And usually, give it a little bit of time. We're able to access the tool after trying again, or a quick refresh, or sometimes it's giving it a few minutes or even a few hours, and the tool usually becomes available again. I will say also, take a look sometimes at the main studentaid.gov page, and you'll see notices about planned outages. But if you see the 404 error, just know that from our experience in the past, it doesn't usually hang around for long. So just try again later. All right, next question. That is, can you voluntarily recertify income? So this question is about income-driven repayment plans. and the process of recertifying and deadlines, we have seen them shift with a lot of the legal action that has been floating around SAVE. So let's take a look at the background from this question. It's fired, fed here. Officially, I'll be unemployed soon, depending on some pending court cases. I don't have to recertify my income for a while. I have no idea when, but I haven't been notified. If I become unemployed, even temporarily, a week or two, can I voluntarily recertify my income to make sure my payments are $0? When I secure my subsequent qualifying employment, will those months count for the next year? By the way, I'm in Save Forbearance HE double hockey stick. No payments at the moment, but this would be advantageous in the event of a buyback. All right. First order of business is I'm just sorry to hear that this person was fired, and I hope the unemployment will not last for long, or perhaps has even been rectified since this question was submitted. Let's take a look at the answer for this question to give some guidance on what they should do around recertification of income. So at the time that we received this, the applications for IDR and consolidation were unavailable. However, the access has been restored, and that is the online application at studentaid.gov. So if you want to complete the application for IDR, you can go to studentaid.gov and complete that application. We are not sure about the processing though. So the second half of this is still correct. And this is from checking on my own servicer's account. No IDR applications, new or pending, are being processed. So I would assume if you did the same thing, trying to recertify, nothing would happen. Recertification is not required until February 2026 at the earliest. So you've got a runway of about 10 months. Loans and SAVE are automatically placed into a forbearance with an estimated end date of July 31st, 2025. We'll see how things shake out. But just as a reminder, the application for income-driven repayment, online access to that application was restored toward the end of March, but the processing part, right now, that's not happening. So to answer your question, you don't need to recertify your income. No payments are required right now because your loans are in the SAVE forbearance, and the recertification is not required till February of 2026. I would recommend voluntarily recertifying should you remain unemployed after the SAVE forbearance ends. And that way you can go ahead and have the $0 income documented. And hopefully by the time things are sorted out, if you are still unemployed, you would be required to make zero payment, even though payments under SAVE resume at whatever point in the future that may be. Okay, good luck to you. All right, let's take a look at the next question. That is, what is my payment? That can be a pretty expensive question. Let's take a look at the background and figure this out. All right. Says on February 19th, I paid $1,126.50. On February 22nd, I received a notice of forbearance. On February 23rd, repayment schedule change was received with a $15 increase. Regular monthly payment increased by $16.30. And the past due amount was listed as zero. So they're on the standard payment plan. And the payment was supposed to be, after this adjustment, $1,142.80. And their question was, should I just pay the $1,630 or should I pay the full $1,142.80? Why is this happening? And is my next month's bill going to be double? Ooh-wee. All right, that's a lot to go through. Let's take a look at the answer. And since the time for that payment has passed, I can tell you the advice that we gave the borrower before this broadcast, and that was just to pay the $16.30. If you didn't request a forbearance, definitely contact your servicer to determine why the loan status changed, and just be mindful that it may take several hours to reach a representative. Also, keep checking the online portal for any further changes with the payment. The important thing is that you want to keep the loan in good standing. And if the payment increases by a nominal amount of $16.30, I'm inclined to say, even if it turns out to be incorrect in the future, if you can afford that, make the payment just to keep things in good standing, for the moment until you get a full explanation on, what's going on. Now, if that amount had been something much, much higher, my advice would change. If they had said, pay double, I would not recommend sending them another check for, more than $1,000. But in this case, $16.30, I say pay it and then, continue to check and ask questions later. All right, let's move on to our next question, which appears to be our last question. And that is, I don't mean to laugh. That text just surprised me when it popped on the screen. It says, how cooked am I? All right, let's take a look at the background for this question before we get to the answer. And this has to do with the FAFSA. It says, my SAI went from 2,885 to 11,482 because last year I only had my mom as a contributor since I didn't know my dad had to be on it too. My parents are divorced, but they still live together. This year I added my dad's information because I'm supposed to. And now I'm finding out that I probably won't be receiving anything from the Pell Grant. I'm actually crashing out right now. I'm not rich. My dad doesn't contribute anything. It's just my mom. So before we get to the answer, just want to thank this student for asking this question because this is, a sensitive situation and it's not easy to open up and share information like this. I'm just really glad that this student has asked for help. Now let's take a look at the answer. Okay, it says you completed the FAFSA correctly this year because there's a question there that says, do your biological or adoptive parents live together? And for you, the answer is yes. Even though your parents are not married, they're still living in the home, and so they're both considered to be contributors, even if they're divorced. Their individual information, consent, and approval and signatures will be required on the FAFSA, and that information is used to compute the SAI. We recommend that you reach out to the financial aid office on your campus and share with them the level of support your father provides. They can let you know if there are any other options that may be available to help with your specific situation. Again, thank you to the student for asking this question, and please ask the financial aid office if you need help. If the aid is not enough, there may be other options available, but you won't know until you ask. And this is not a question for the federal government. You complete your FAFSA through the federal government, but when it comes to what your day-to-day experience is like with financial aid and on campus, this is where you need to lean into the financial aid office on your campus, and hopefully they will be able to help get you some additional support. All right, so I was checking my phone to see if we have any comments or additional questions, and I don't see any that have come through yet. So I want to shift gears and go to a resource that we share during every edition of Office Hours, and that's a resource for Marylanders, which is the Student Loan Ombudsman's website. The Student Loan Ombudsman is housed in the State Department of Labor, and the Student Loan Ombudsman is here to help with servicer problems that include failure by the servicer to communicate with the borrower, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidations or modification errors, and or inappropriate collection activity or tactics. So if you're experiencing problems with your loan servicer, and not just a problem for the first time, but if you're experiencing a problem and you have tried to work through it with them and you are not reaching a resolution, this might be the time that you need to bring in a third party to help advocate for yourself. And we highly recommend reaching out to the Office of the Student Loan Ombudsman. You can find them online at the link that is scrolling across the screen. And I'm going to check one more time for comments or questions. I don't see any extra ones. So in that case, I just want to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question for office hours. We appreciate your engagement. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in and to our subscribers. We appreciate you as well. Office hours usually happens twice per month. Last month, I had a really um, bad electrical issue. And it happened on the day that we were supposed to have office hours, March 26th. And it took a couple of days to get resolved. So we missed that. And that happened to be the day that the online application was restored for income driven repayment and consolidation. So power is out in one place, things are restored in another. Either way, it's all good. We just thank you so much for your support, your engagement, your questions. If you have a question that comes up after the broadcast, please do let us know. You can go to our website at mccfw.org/contact, complete that contact form, and we may answer your question on the next edition of Office Hours. Aside from that, you can tag us on social media. We are at the MCCFW on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, we have a really exciting project that's kicking off with Towson University next week. It's called the Crest Academy Challenge. So we are going to be spending a lot of time with current students, helping them build their financial life skills. And go Tigers. We're ready for it. In the meantime, again, if you have questions, please do reach out. Just want to reiterate how much we appreciate your support. And as always, until next time, be well.